our third annual Immigrant Heritage Week celebration in partnership with the Council of the Arts and Humanities of Staten Island Folklife and the Staten Island Immigrants Council. We're very, very excited to be having all of you here. There's a few things that both Chris and I want to say before we start about how this particular event came to be, and a few thank yous. But I can't help but want to start with probably one of the more exciting discoveries of this project for Chris and I, that not only do we know, have we known for a long time that there's a Nuyorican literature, but we discovered that there's actually Staten Island Hispanic literature. And so some of you may have already known this for a long time, but I wanted to start by reading an excerpt from Nieves-Powell Nieves' short story in Staten Island Noir. Some of you may have heard of this. I don't know if her story is called The Fly-Ass Puerto Rico Girl from the Stapleton Projects. And it's a very revealing story about racial tension and complex identity on Staten Island. But I wanted to read from the end of it, which actually takes a more optimistic tone. I'm used to having a poop.
Be careful with that.
30 years later, he came back, and I'm going to skip to him getting on the bus. It's on the eve of Obama's election. When the doors opened, 3 teens boarded. This is in St. George. Maybe 2 were Ecuadorian, possibly Honduran or Peruvian. The other blonde, maybe Albanian, maybe Russian, but definitely not Italian. One was wearing a white, red, and blue t-shirt of an African-American presidential hopeful. Another boy was holding a skateboard, talking about a professional skateboard champion, the son of a Mexican comedian who beat the hell out of the white boy. They all spoke English well. A conversation like that 30 years ago could have cost you your life. Now it was small talk. He watched the neighborhoods morph into hoods, then back into neighborhoods, then back into hoods. What was once a Burger King was now a variety of places to eat. A Sri Lankan restaurant, a Dominican luncheonette, a West African coffee shop. As the bus made its way closer to Stapleton, he took in all that was there and all that had changed. So I think that this captures exactly why we're here tonight at what we think is one of the first opportunities to bring together a collection of artists, photographers, activists, professionals to celebrate Staten Island's Hispanic culture, all that it is, all that it's been, and all that it will become. And it's a great moment because we know that while all of Staten Island's diversity is increasing in so many ways, and I wanted to just put up some examples of how Staten Island's diversity is changing as the foreign-born Italian population ages and new Mexican, Chinese, Filipino, Polish, Russian, Indian, and Korean immigrants transform our borough. But one of the biggest changes, as we learned yesterday from a speaker from the New York City Department of Planning, is actually within the Hispanic population itself. If you look at the age group of the youngest Staten Islanders, under 18, 50%, and the largest within there of diverse minority, Asian, Hispanic, and African American groupings is the Hispanic, the growing young people who are the future of our borough. Oops, something wrong with my computer. And within the Hispanic population itself, not mostly foreign-born, Puerto Rican, of course, all being American citizens, but the growing number and diverse amount of Mexican, Peruvian, Dominican, Ecuadorian, Colombian, Cuban, and other Hispanic groups that are transforming Staten Island. And just to show you one last graph, which actually I thought was the most interesting of all, the percentage change in the Hispanic population in our borough is not a North Shore phenomenon. This is all over Staten Island in every single neighborhood, that this enormous transformation from 5 to 10 to 80% growth in the Hispanic population is spread across this borough. And we now know that Staten Island has roughly 17%, or 1 in 6 Staten Islanders is Hispanic. That is roughly the same as the American population as a whole. It's a tremendous thing to notice. The question, I think, and to sort of question a little bit the issue in the short story about 30 years ago is, I think we don't really know what was happening 30 years ago. I think we still have a long way to go in thinking about the history of Hispanic Staten Island. This is an area where I hope people will do more research. We only had a chance to sort of scratch the surface with this question, and we came across one very famous example of a Mexican-American Staten Islander, the father of folk singer Joan Baez, who taught at Wagner College and lived in Westerly on sort of the border with Port Richmond in the 1940s. He got tenure here in the math and physics department. So I'm sure that if we had an opportunity to go back historically, whether it's 50 years or 150 years, we're going to find a lot of role models, Hispanic Staten Islanders, who are role models for today's youth, not only our Hispanic American youth, but all of our youth, across a wide variety of fields and disciplines. So this is just the beginning of a very exciting project about identity and politics on Staten Island. And then to speak about the more cultural issues, I'm going to ask Chris to say a few words. And then I want to thank all of our artists. Maybe we'll do that together.
Just to introduce myself, my name is Christopher Moulet. I'm the Deputy Director and Folklorist at the Council on the Arts and Humanities for Staten Island. So I work a lot with different traditional artists, people that have worked with traditions that are passed down from generation, things that mark their heritage, whether it's music, dance, stories, particular languages, things that are important to preserve. So my job is to basically see that that happens in some shape or form, whether it's helping people get grants or encouraging people, documenting what they do, preserving and promoting. So when I got this opportunity to work with Lori, I always love working with Lori, she had connected with some particular artists that were from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and whether they're writers or painters or photographers, I noticed sort of a theme as I worked with them, met with them, did interviews with them, this sort of negotiation of how they are keeping these traditions, whether they're going in their home, out in the public, but also in their hearts. I think that's something that I noticed a lot of these artists sort of working out through their paintings, whether it's Homero, who is from the Dominican Republic and came here about 3 years ago and had a hard time getting used to life in the United States. And through his painting and hearing him talk, you sort of learn a lot about what a struggle that is to maintain his identity, who he is, and those traditions that he left behind. That also comes through in Olga Ayala, who is a polymer clay artist, who revisited the Three Kings, and you can see her clay sculptures in the gallery, and sort of tried to reconnect with that, and she sort of said to herself, I really want this to be part of my kids' lives. Jose Ocasio, who will join me later on to play some music from Puerto Rico, he had a great line about searching, this sort of search, this evolution, like Linda Nieves-Powell talked about with me, about this journey of dealing with your identity, with dealing with your culture in the United States, dealing with your heritage. And Jose Ocasio had this great line about how he really struggled when he was learning drums in Brooklyn and as he was getting older, and he really wanted to revisit his roots in Puerto Rico, and he went back there. And this idea of like finding what the music is in your heart, to search for what is the music or sounds of your culture, of your heritage, and how that later in life played an important role. So I think as far as the young people here go, I think this is a really important exhibit, and I'm hoping that through something like this, people will kind of be inspired to look into their heritage, because it's an important point of pride that often gets overlooked for various reasons. And I really love these conversations that we're going to have today about whether it's immigration reform and some political issues, but I think it's also important to remember just how important heritage is and what it is. And cultural heritage is really a source of personal pride and connection to particular communities, not just individuals. And I think when we deal with communities on Staten Island, we need to be sensitive of that and make sure that people like Bohorquez-Geisler and Linda Nieves-Powell are the ones at the table when making decisions about these communities. The gig is up. There's no more time to have just political people, political representatives to be at the front of the table. I think some of these artists that we've seen in this exhibit have done a great job of showing that these aren't hidden art forms, these aren't hidden communities. They're going along and practicing and thinking deeply about their tradition. So I just really hope you guys all check out the exhibit and walk up to one of the artists and talk to them about what it is they do and try to learn more about it, because it's really special. So I'd like to just ask you to give a hand to all of the artists that participated in the exhibit. If you could all stand up, all artists, all Olga, please stand. Catalina Mendez-Torres, Olet, Jose Ocasio, Irma, Bohorquez-Geisler, Linda, so thank you so much. And I just want to, before I get off, I'm going to introduce Isabella Cardona from the mayor's office, who would like to say a few words. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the artists and to the organizers of the event, everybody involved, for welcoming me so warmly. The exhibit is truly, truly inspiring and beautiful, and it really resonated with me. My name is Isabella. I'm from the Mayor's Community Affairs Unit. I cover Staten Island for the Mayor's office. And the folks at the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs unfortunately couldn't be here because they had so many Immigrant Heritage Week events today, this past week. But I just wanted to come to represent Immigrant Affairs at the Mayor's Office, Community Affairs at the Mayor's Office, and the Mayor in general. The Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, I worked with them last year. They help to facilitate integration of immigrants around New York City by promoting and recommending programs and policies to integrate immigrants into the civic, social, economic life of New York City. And so we're a resource, Immigrant Affairs, Community Affairs, the Mayor's Office in general. I want you all to know that. And I represent the mayor of community boards on Staten Island and civic associations on Staten Island, cultural institutions on Staten Island. So I'm here and definitely a resource. The mayor and the commissioner for Immigrant Affairs, Fatima Shalma, kicked off Immigrant Heritage Week last week at Gracie Mansion. So I just wanted to read a quote that the mayor said that resonated with me. In New York City, we've always known how important immigrants are to this country. Our diversity, our tolerance, and our spirit of mutual respect is part of what makes this city so great. That's what we hope to highlight during Immigrant Heritage Week, and it's the reason our city continues to attract people from around the world looking to build a better future. And I know that definitely resonated with me because and I'm taking off my mayor's office hat and putting on my personal hat. My family immigrated here from South America about 25 years ago, and I've just always been so proud to not only be a member of the Staten Island community, but a member of the immigrant community within Staten Island. So I applaud you all for highlighting this. And I know it's not just a week of immigrant heritage, recognition. It's what everybody does on a day-to-day. So I really appreciate that. And again, I'm a resource here for all. So happy Immigrant Heritage Week.
So yeah, I just want to underline how this is part of a bigger, questioning, a national questioning, a questioning on our campus about immigration reform, that, seeking information about heritage and culture goes hand in hand with the political questions that have been raised. And there have been some really good events at Wagner in conjunction with the March on Washington for comprehensive immigration reform. And actually, after tonight's event, for the students who want to stay up really late, there's an event at 9:30. Do you want to announce it?
Yeah, so We're doing a showing of the documentary The Dream Is Now, which is done by the filmmaker who did Inconvenient Truth and Waiting for Superman, about dreamers and about the comprehensive immigration reform bill. So that's at 9:30 in the coffee house with food. And then tomorrow as well at 1, we have a social justice dialogue on immigration reform and what it means to be an immigrant and undocumented in the United States in Union 201 with free lunch. And so Irma and some others will be presenting a discussion on that. So everyone is welcome.
This is a very engaged and committed campus, and this panel is part of that. And one of the things that we do through the Port Richmond Student Advisory Board and through various class projects is that we work closely with El Centro del Inmigrante and also with the Staten Island Immigrants Council. And so I'm just going to call upon Gonzalo to come up and present the annual Immigrant Heritage Week Awards. I just wanted to mention, I don't think it has come up yet, I was leaving it for Isabel, but why we have Immigrant Heritage Week this week in April. Does anybody know why, by any chance? It's the 10th annual New York City Immigrant Heritage Week event, so it's possible by now that somebody might ask, why this week in April? It's actually a great homage to whoever came up with this concept. April 7th in 1911 is the day that the United States welcomed on Ellis Island the most number of immigrants ever in our history. And so it's a way to acknowledge how much that wave of immigrants in 1911 and continuing through to the present has really mattered in our national economy and to our country. So let me call up Gonzalo, who really needs no introduction, I think, in this setting, but somebody who works every day to better the lives of immigrants. Thank you.
Thank you everybody for coming to this great event. I think since last year, we used to have Immigrant Heritage Week usually at Borough Hall, and with Dr. Weintraub and Wagner College, we came together, and I think it was a good idea to put both events together. Last year we featured Muslims on Staten Island, and we had a great panel, and we really were able to go into depth to understand the different lives, the different facets, the different professions, the different histories that different immigrant groups bring to enrich the Staten Island community. And this year we have this incredible panel about Latinos, exploring Latinos on Staten Island, and we haven't talked about next year. So if there are any suggestions here, I think it could be accommodated. But I'd like to invite other members of the Staten Island Immigrant Council with me. Our current first female president of the Staten Island Liberian Community Association is here, and Telly Brown, the former president of the Staten Island Liberian Community Association, are here. So if you guys want to come down, so you can help me present the awards, please. So every year we for Immigrant Heritage Week, we present 2 awards. And the Staten Island Immigrants Council is a group of about 2,000 immigrant organizations on Staten Island that work with the various immigrant groups. And our role is first to understand and have a platform from each community so we can know about their own issues, so we can know how our issues transcend not only immigrants but native borns, and also understand about their culture and their heritage, traditions, and just a place for us who come from different races and different places of the world to come together. Every year we honor 2 people. These 2 awards are one, the Immigrant Advocacy Award and the Immigrant Service Award. The Immigrant Advocacy Award goes usually to a person from Staten Island, not necessarily an immigrant, or first generation immigrant, I should say, so because I think there are very few people here who don't descend from an immigrant. But it's just for people who have done an extraordinary contribution, not only to the Staten Island immigrant community, but the Staten Island community as a whole. And the second award goes to an immigrant who have basically gone out of his way to do work for either its own community or the larger community. And this year, we would like to present the Immigrant Advocacy Award to the Steven Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation. And I'd like to invite Tony Navarino from the foundation to come down. And before we present the award, I'd like to just say a few words. And Tony really have been at the forefront and really spearheading the incredible work that the foundation has been doing since the hurricane hit. And for the ones, which I'm sure like a lot of people do know, but for the ones that don't know, the Steven Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation has been at the front of the community service philanthropy on Staten Island since its founding nearly 12 years ago. After the death of firefighter Steven Siller in the World Trade Center attack of 9/11, Steven was the youngest of a host of Siller siblings who was on his way to play golf with his brothers in the morning of 9/11. He turned around when he saw the towers burning and responded to the need for firefighting assistance. When his car could not get through the battery tunnel because it was closed due to the attack, he put on his firefighter gear and ran through the tunnel into the World Trade Center. Unfortunately, he did not return alive. His family, with his brother Frank as the lead and president of the foundation, turned great sorrow into great service and profound pain into an extraordinary passion for doing good. The foundation has built homes for the disabled Iraqi and Afghanistan wars veterans through the Wounded Warriors Project, served also as a host for local causes, and served thousands of Staten Islanders in need. Most recently, the foundation responded to Hurricane Sandy by raising millions of dollars, distributing millions of dollars, and providing direct one-on-one help through the free store and hub, and through the support of many of the points of distribution centers in the disaster areas. The foundation also purchased 25 new homes for Sandy-affected families who would like to move to other parts of Staten Island. They have been extraordinarily kind and welcoming to the immigrant communities affected by Sandy that are facing barriers of language, culture, and status in many cases. Their aid and goodwill has broken all barriers to celebrate the reality that Staten Island is indeed one family. We extend our deepest gratitude to the Siller Foundation for what it has done for immigrants affected by Sandy, and all it will continue to do in the years ahead as we seek to achieve full recovery to our island and its residents. So, Tony? Oh, sure. You can stay behind the panel.
Yeah, just be careful.
Be careful.
Okay, everybody.
Stay away.
Thank you.
I humbly accept this award on behalf of the Steven Siller Foundation. Like Gonzalo said before, we stepped up to the plate, and that's what we do. We do good, and it was not to shine anything on us, but when Sandy hit, a devastating thing that happened on Staten Island, we had immigrants coming into our office every single day. And I can honestly say, with open arms, we took care of them. We didn't worry about papers. We didn't worry about their identification. We just knew they needed help. And it made us a better foundation, and made me a better person to help out immigrants. And I'd just like to thank the Staten Island Immigrant Council. This fellow here, Gonzalo Macalo, he's a true Staten Island hero for what he does at El Salvador every day. And Terry Troyer, another one that we have that runs Project Hospitality, that does a wonderful job each and every day. I'm glad we have Isabella on our side now to watch over us on Staten Island. And all I want to say is, Staten Islanders, we're lucky to be Staten Islanders because we do watch out for each other. And if anybody needs anything, please come to the Steven Siller Foundation. We will take it with open arms. God bless you all.
So, So, as I mentioned, we also like to give an award that is called the Immigrant Service Award. It usually goes to an immigrant. This year, the Staten Island Immigrants Council has chosen Ilya Gela. Ilya, like to come over? What I can. So, Ilya Gela is a recent College of Staten Island graduate and affected Sandy resident from Midland Beach, who answered the call to volunteer service in the hours after Sandy by providing support, distribution of food, goods, and services to thousands of people in need at St. Margaret Mary's Church. As the chief volunteer at the Occupy Sandy Free Store, Ilya has been a gracious example of hospitality and friendship to the whole community. He has conducted immigrant surveys, identified families in need, and fought for their right to receive services and financial support. He has organized and coordinated a weekly Sunday legal clinic at St. Margaret Mary's Church for nearly 6 months. He is a welcomed site now at 551 Midland Avenue, and a host of immigrant advocacy meetings, forums, and work efforts, including ongoing involvement in the long-term recovery organization. We are grateful for a level of community service that goes above and beyond, because Ilya reflects the best in humanity and is an example of what it means to embrace all people as one family. We present him with the 2013 Staten Island Immigrants Council Award for being an outstanding immigrant. And I have to mention that Ilya is from Belarus.
Do you want a picture?
Yes, that'd be great. Can you roll it?
Okay.
Yeah, great.
I got this. Hold that.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Again, I'd like to graciously accept this award from the Staten Island Immigrants Council. I gotta apologize that I was late. I was helping with some legal translation today at the Disaster Recovery Center that ran a bit late. At this point, the way I see it is that we're all immigrants, and that what we gotta look forward to is a sense of community and mutual aid. And this tragedy gave an opportunity for people to come through and be there for their neighbors. That's what it's come down to. And the point is that I'm gonna give you this line if you want to take it down and put it into any publications. The hurricane didn't discriminate against anyone. Once the hurricane hit, didn't really matter your status or where you're from. All that mattered was that you were part of the community, that every member of the community responded. Didn't matter where they were from. And that, this actually, the early moments in the response actually had a lot of great moments of people coming together and a lot of camaraderie. And hopefully that carries on from the recovery that's going to be going on for quite some time now. And it's going to be going on for a really long time. And hopefully we'll see some of you come out and volunteer. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our part, and I would love to now get it back to Lori for having.
Thank you. It's an honor to be hosting the award ceremony. But I know that all of you are waiting to hear about the big question that was posed to our panel. I know I'm waiting to hear the answer. How do we define Hispanic in our borough? And I just want to briefly introduce our moderator, whose bio, as well as the bios of all the speakers, are on the yellow handout. Rather than read each person's bio, I've asked them to introduce themselves in 3 or 4 minutes, however they would like, emphasizing their culture, identity, or political advocacy work. But I think we must stop and introduce the moderator and thank him for coming to Staten Island. Jose Calderon is president of the Hispanic Federation, one of the leading Latino organizations in the nation. He focuses strategically on public policy advocacy, program and resource development, and Latino nonprofit capacity building. All tremendously important, particularly at this moment in American history. A graduate of Hunter College and St. John's, he received his bachelor's degree and then master's in Latin American Studies with a concentration in political science and Spanish literature. And he's worked on such different issues as HIV/AIDS, education and immigration, economic empowerment, and civic engagement. He's helped implement the Latino College Success Initiative, the Workforce Development Project, the Hispanic Education Summit, the National Latino AIDS Awareness Day, and legislative policy conferences. And it's very exciting to be welcoming him here as moderator, as well as our 4 panelists, Linda Nieves-Powell, Irma Bohorquez-Geisler, Cesar Vargas, and Anthony Gonzalez. So I want to turn the panel now over to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Lori. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Buenas tardes. It is great to be here in Staten Island. As I was making my way over here, the staff was like, you have to leave, right? So we work in downtown New York City. And this is the myth of Staten Island, right? Where we think it's on another planet sometimes when we're in the other boroughs. You have to leave 3 hours before to get here, right? So they had me scheduled to leave at 3:30. And I said, wait a minute. I said, we are literally 15, 20 minutes away, right? Depending on traffic. But that is, something that is very real, right? I think when people think about Staten Island as the forgotten borough, right? And especially the way we think, and we being, sort of in the other boroughs, and how myopic we are in our thinking around Staten Island and what's happening here. And there's so many great things that are happening on Staten Island. And really want to salute the work that Wagner is doing here to really promote diversity and inclusion. So a big round of applause for Lori and the team here. And also for the Council on the Arts and Humanities for Staten Island, and really a big round of applause for them as well too. Then of course one of our member organizations, and I'll tell you a little bit about the Federation, but one of our member organizations is here, is El Centro de Migrante, Gonzalo, aplausos para él, for all the great work that they do. Really, Gonzalo is really for us in so many ways the bridge to what's happening here on Staten Island, and so I want to thank him for that, for always keeping Staten Island top of mind in terms of the work that we do, locally, nationally, and regionally, and that's critically important as we think about issues like immigration reform, and we think about the Affordable Care Act, and we think about sort of the status of immigrants and Latino community overall. That's critically important because we need to hear those diverse voices, and we need to hear certainly what's happening here in Staten Island. Let me just quickly say that the Federation is a national advocacy organization, and we're working on a lot of these issues that you care so deeply about. And so let me stop there and get to what we want to really talk about here, which is really identity. And that is so fraught for the Latino community with so many issues, right? This search for self is part of the human condition, as you know, right? So it's not just unique to the Latino community. So as a species, as human beings, that's something that we're constantly struggling to find, right? Who we are and what does that mean for us. But for the Latino community in particular, it's insanely ridiculous, right? I mean, it really is just insanely complicated because of a multitude of issues, right? When you think about race, when you think about migration, when you think about colonization, when you think about language, when you think about class, when you think about just a multitude of issues that we confront that are very unique to the Latino experience, right? Because we are in many ways this sort of, sort of a melting pot of different, identities, right? Different races and whatever have you. And so, to tell you real quick, in terms of my parents are Dominican, and so we are largely an Afrocentric culture, right? And there are a lot of issues in the Dominican Republic around sort of accepting that. And so you grow up under a certain lens and looking at yourself a certain way, and it's all the more complicated when you get to this country. When you're looked at another way, right? And so we struggle with that issue constantly, and I think it's an ongoing process. So I'm very excited to hear from the panelists about sort of how they view and how they identify as Hispanics or Latinos. That's another word, right? You say how do we define Hispanic in this borough? Some people may have issues with Hispanic, and some people say Latinos, and that's not a right term. And we struggle with a lot of things, including obviously how we define ourselves just by name alone, right? So, again, Hispanic works for some folks, doesn't work for a lot of other folks. Latinos works for some folks, doesn't work for a bunch of folks. But we're here to talk about what it means to be Latino / Hispanic / us in this borough. And as Lori mentioned, we have some wonderful panelists here, right? A lot of them who are artists, artists or advocates, and really have, I think, a distinct point of view because they, probably more than the general public, are really, sort of exploring this issue of identity. And I want to start with a question to the panel, and I want to start with Linda, who has, I have to read your books, Linda, and I'm sorry that I haven't now, but I certainly will pick these books up because, that she's written some amazing books here, which really talk about Latino identity, and we really need our writers to really help us understand who we are, right? Just like any other culture, our writers really help us get a sense of sort of what our history is, who we are, and identity, and that search for self, they're critical in that journey. So let me start with Linda with this question regarding what are the barriers on Staten Island that keep Hispanic voices out of the cultural landscape? Are they hidden? Are they quiet? Or are they simply not invited to the table to speak? It's kind of a loaded question. You were talking about the whole topic is loaded, right?
Yes.
But let's start there, right? So what are the barriers on Staten Island that keep Hispanic voices out of the cultural landscape? Are they quiet and hidden, or are they simply not invited to the table to speak? Linda?
Does this work? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Lori and Christopher.
It's not, maybe it's
okay,
the past.
because I could be loud. Thank you, Lori and Christopher, for inviting me. As far as what's going on in terms of the Latino voice on Staten Island, I find that in the last 30 years I've seen a major change. So I have to look at it that way. I can't just see it as what's going on today without that's just our journey too. We got to know our past to know the present. So I came here. My parents bought a home. We were in Manhattan when I was 9. We went to Long Beach, Long Island for 3 years. The commute was too much for my dad because he worked at the MTA. And we moved to Staten Island. We actually bought a house in Clifton, which is between Stapleton and Rosebank, which at that time, Rosebank was all Italian American and Stapleton was Black and Latino, and you could not cross certain streets at that time. I remember that. But they bought a house in Clifton on Townsend Avenue, and we bought the house from my aunt. And one of the questions that came up, I'm going this way to come back. One of the questions that came up was, why did my aunt buy the house? Apparently their apartment burnt down, or no, they got robbed in Manhattan, and somehow they made it here. So it was accidental. But next door to them was another aunt who was married to, he's Ukrainian, right? And he had family here. So that husband brought that aunt, then brought everyone else. That's what usually happens. But anyway, in the last 30 years, what I've seen is it went from being completely, be careful, don't be proud, you can get your butt kicked if you go into the wrong neighborhood, which is what I wrote in the Staten Island Noir piece, because I saw it with my own eyes. And I remember I have a cousin that we went to hang out in Rosebank one day back in, I think it was 1980 or something like that. We were sitting in the park listening to WBLS, an R&B station, and 2 seconds later, bottles were thrown at us. We were told to get out. Today, I don't see that, but I'm very interested in all my work is about our identity, my identity as a Latina in this country, and just in general, the evolution of Latinos. And in Staten Island, it's really strange because it's a different experience. I remember having to be very cautious and then getting angry about that. And then eventually I did see a change. Staten Island is weird to begin with. It's just a weird little place. So add that to the whole I'm looking for myself experience. I don't see it being hidden. I think it's, for me, I've grown to have a voice. I own my voice now, where I did not. In the same place I did not, I found my voice. So it was my own evolution and my own journey. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I do think that it really, for me, the personal journey, I have to look at it when we first came here, how it was. It was very violent. During that same time, it was Howard Beach was going through something. You just knew to stay in your lane and not go anywhere you weren't supposed to go. And then that sort of changed in time. I saw it little by little. But that's my experience.
Oh, thank you. Anybody else want to comment from the panel? I'm sure they do.
Hi. My name is Irma Bohorquez-Geisler. The first time, I'm originally from Mexico, and I have been living in Staten Island for 21 years. The first time I left Mexico was when I went to study in England, where I met my husband, Frank, who is from New York. We both were students doing PhDs. When we finished studying, we came here for seven months, and then we went to Mexico for 3 years. He never lived in Mexico, and I never lived in the United States. And so we somehow arranged that we should live both of us in each country, and then we will make a decision where we were going to live. There was just an idea. So when we finished studying, we came back here in 1987 for about 7 months. And being studying all my life, it was time for me to become a mother and start a family. So after 7 months being here, I felt with no family. Of course, Frank's family is very small, but always I felt that I needed to go home. So we went to Mexico, and I had my daughter in Mexico. And after 3 years, we decided to live permanently here in New York. So we came back in 1981 in Seagate, Brooklyn, where my husband grew up, and what is a Jewish community. My husband is Jewish. And so in 1992, he found a job in Staten Island, and that's how we ended up in Staten Island. And now that I'm here in Staten Island and have a child, I started exploring about my culture and my heritage. And so there wasn't very much of anything in Staten Island. And the school where my daughter went, it was a Montessori school, and they were very interested in the diversity of the parents that were in the school. They decided that year they wanted to study Mexico as a country. So they really got me involved in the whole year round. We studied history, we studied geography. I did a lot of educational programs. I am a scientist by training. And so we did a lot of science. And we celebrated a lot of the holidays from Mexico. This was a very good transition for my daughter and for me to become part of the school community. So one of the holidays that we celebrated in the school was the Day of the Dead celebration. There are two basic projects that I work about my culture and my heritage in Staten Island, which one of them is the Day of the Dead celebration, which is an occasion, a traditional Mexican celebration where we remember and honor our loved ones that have passed away. And we do it in a joyful way. So that's how I started with this project. Once long year passed from celebrating Mexico in the school, I continue looking for more ways of being connected to my cultural identity and heritage, but there wasn't very much. Then I was invited to do an event of the Day of the Dead at the Arts and Crafts Museum in the city. And from there I continued and I decided that I wanted to do this in our community. And I started going to schools, I started doing it in libraries, I started doing it here in museums, and this is how I started growing with no support. And I remember I was trying to get some of the marigold flowers that we need for the Day of the Dead celebration, and we didn't have them here, so I would have to order them from California. And so sometimes when I have some extra ones, I will take it to some of the shops and just give it to them. I said, well, maybe when people start seeing them, maybe they decide that they want to do it themselves as well. Because one of the main issues is that once you have been removed geographically from your homeland and spiritually, not necessarily you continue the traditions. And I think this was an important issue for me. And so I continue doing this event, and not just for any other Mexicans that were here, but at the time there weren't so many Mexican families. And if they were very isolated, and a few of them. So nowadays we have a lot of families, and we have food and groceries, and we are able to get most of the things that we need. So this way of me searching for my cultural heritage identity brought me to the bigger picture of once the Mexican community started growing in Staten Island. I realized that basically there is no Mexican community. We're not united. We are not like a community. We're all isolated. So the event of the Day of the Dead celebration is something that we can always relate to, because we all have someone that passed away and we would like to remember them. So my vision started changing, and I saw it also as a way of getting the Mexican population together to build a community, but at the same time to build bridges to the other ethnic communities. And also another way of the larger community to get to know us here in Staten Island as through the arts, through music, through dances, and through traditional foods. So this has become a bigger mission for me. So that's one of the main things that I work on. Also, I have another project.
I'm sorry. Let me stop you there so that because I want to be very sensitive to the time. So how much time do we have, Laura?
Oh, I think it could take another 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay, so because I want to get through this. There's something that very, very important that Linda and both Irma mentioned was this journey, right? I mean, obviously it's been this journey for both of you that has been, obviously 2 decades in the making, and how the arts are so critically important around. Is that mic working at all? Can you guys hear me? Even without the mic? So I was saying that, obviously, both of the panels for Linda and Irma, the personal journey, right? And it's the process that we see with all immigrants. It takes a really long time, and in this search for self, the arts are so critically important in defining a people, a culture. So I want to actually take a step back before we even get to that question of what it means to be Hispanic in Staten Island. What does it mean to be Hispanic, right? I mean, we are such a complex people, and so I want Anthony and Cesar to tackle that question. What are the elements that define us as a people? Some people will say that we are very, very different, and that there is no Latino community per se. I would disagree with that, but you know, we have differences, obviously, as a people, right? You know, if you come from Argentina, you're going to be different from somebody from Puerto Rico. There are differences, but there are really things that unite us as well, too. So, Cesar, we'll start with you.
I think I love Staten Island now. I think that's one of my first thought that comes to mind. But for so long, I actually wanted to run away from Staten Island. I actually moved to Staten Island maybe like 7 years ago, and from Brooklyn. And for me, being Hispanic was kind of a concept, including coming from other place. And I think that's something because I came from Mexico when I was 5 years old. As many of us consider ourselves dreamers or undocumented youth who came here when we were young. So for me, the concept just quickly was, I think, you know, the journey that we mentioned for me was a journey of trying to find myself into a new place constantly. From first coming to the US, trying to understand what New York was, what Brooklyn was, to really now understanding what Staten Island was. And I think the question that we mentioned before is like, what does it mean? And Staten Island is very weird because in Brooklyn, you have your identities throughout the borough. You have Sunset Park, you have Brighton Beach, Russian, you have, you know, Brownsville, you have a lot of amazing neighborhoods and rich. In Staten Island, it's like somebody just put a people and shake the bag and everybody sprinkled throughout. My block itself, I live in South Shore by Annandale, and for such a long time, I actually didn't feel like I belonged on Staten Island, and which is why I always wanted to go back and go back to Brooklyn, where my friends, where I grew up with. And it was not until then that I really understood. For me, the question was to really understand your culture is to really plug into your community. And the first time that I actually did that was actually connecting through Gonzalo and really learning what it means to be a Staten Island, but what it means Hispanic, which for me simply, to be Hispanic, to be Latino, is a passionate collectivism, or in other words, family. To learn from relationship of so many other people. And people who have, you know, inspired me, I think Frank, and this is something that I think Staten Island brings, a commitment to service. And whether you're in the media or not, I think it's a personal relationship to serve. And from Jose, many people, Gonzalo, it's just, you know, simply an understanding and we have amazing dreamers here in Staten Island. Jessica comes to learn from so many people. So I think that's something that we understand, a collectivism to share, because we are a family, a familia. So for me, that's a quick concept of understanding what it means to be Hispanic.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthony Gonzalez. My mother actually came here from Lima, Peru in the 1980s. My father is actually Puerto Rican and Italian. I was born in Brooklyn, in Coney Island, and we moved to Staten Island in 1997. So I could speak as kind of like a finished product of what's going on, or I'm kind of still in that journey of identity that's going on, probably because I'm trying to think, when my mother first came here and I was growing up, she relied on me to sort of teach her English, and she wanted me to assimilate into the American culture. And so it was more about going in, because like you said, like Staten Island's very weird, where with that whole throw everyone in the bag and now they're all sprinkled across. I remember growing up, I was only one of about 2 or 3 Hispanics in my class. And you could see as you get older that the population is actually growing. And for someone who's growing up like me, that was born here and still searching for that identity, it's something more or less like a balancing act, like Dr. Weintraub said yesterday, where you take what you really want and hold dear to yourself with regards to culture, and you also take away from the American society as well, which is just as much as a melting pot anyway, and you all just bring it together to form yourself. And what we have to really remember is that within the term Hispanic, that there's just so much diversity within it, that there's so many different types of cultures and traditions and foods and everything like that, that it all just meshes together, and that in a place like Staten Island, growing up as someone who's born here and still searching for that Hispanic identity. There's so much diversity, and you just take what you want and just mold it together to create yourself.
Okay, great. Thank you. That other mic is not working. Well, so Cesar mentioned, and I just said something that was really important, is this commitment to service, which is, you know, I mean, not unique, obviously, to Staten Island, but you see it here in such great proportions, right? Obviously, you have a lot of people who work in government, who work in terms of being first responders, and a lot of first responders here. And the whole experience for me as an immigrant myself is the whole idea of integration, right? We talk a lot about immigrant integration. A lot of the work that El Centro del Inmigrante does is around immigrant integration. A lot of what we do is really helping people integrate into society, and that's so critically important. And that's how that is such an important part of defining yourself, right? Because you define yourself by your surroundings in many ways, and the people around you in that society. And the idea of self is really complicated when you're marginalized from that community, when you're marginalized from that society in general. So I want to talk a little bit about that theme, and to go back to Linda, our writer, right, who has explored these themes over and over again. Really this sense of integration, what's happening here, and you mentioned the journey that it's taken a long time in terms of feeling that you're part of Staten Island here, that you know that your voice here is reflected in the larger, you know, sort of borough, right, and that you can hear like different Latino voices within Staten Island. What's happening around integration here, and sort of, you know, it seems like there's a positive trend happening, but I want you to talk a little bit about that.
All right, what's the question?
Well, I'm sorry, it's a little, the integration that's happening here in Staten Island around Latinos. Do you feel that, you know, things are moving in the right direction? I mean, we touched a little bit about it. Do you feel that Latino voices are being reflected in the overall culture here in Staten Island?
It's really hard for me to see what's going on around. I can only tell by my observation as a writer. So I'll give you that, because politically I don't know what's going on that affects the community. I don't know who's moving in, who's moving out. You know, I don't know what neighborhoods are coming up. I can only see what I see when I walk out my door. But I shared this story with Christopher when I was being interviewed, and I want to share it with you, and I think this is what I see.
Okay.
When my son was 4, he went to PS 58, and there was a little Mexican girl. I used to bring my dog, I have a Maltese, to the schoolyard. And there was this little Mexican girl who could not speak English well, and her mom used to be very shy. Because there's this little playground in the back of, behind PS 58, where the kids could play when they get out of school. So this little girl would, being that nobody was playing with her, would come to the dog, to my dog. And she would, I don't speak Spanish fluently, so it was really difficult, but I could, you know, we sort of communicated in our own little way, this little girl and I. She reminded me of me when I was, you know, growing up. But so this little girl is like 4 or 5, and I would see her through the years. My son went there up until he was in the 5th grade. So what's that? 5, 7, whatever. Not good at math, that's why I write. So she's there that entire time, and just recently, I was picking my son up at middle school. He's in the 8th grade now. And I see her. And I was blown away. She's standing on the corner waiting for a bus, speaking perfect English. And so assimilated, and so like the other kids. And I said, that's what you see. This is what excites me about the experience of coming here, the good stories. Because it is a journey, and she actually became someone else in the 10 years that I was watching her grow up.
That's a great story, and that's exactly what I wanted you to say. so thank you. So and you said that, you know, obviously you're not directly involved in some of the political movements that are happening here, and I think that that's an important conversation. And so, Cesar, now you've been here 7 years. Obviously very politically active and engaged. Tell me a little bit about what's happening here on that front. We know obviously we have El Centro, we have other organizations that are coming up, right? And Irma mentioned the growing Mexican community that is here, right? Especially here in Port Richmond, right? In that area, but throughout probably throughout the borough at this point. But tell me a little bit about sort of how we're gaining a voice politically in this borough, right? We're not where we are in the Bronx, perhaps, right? But tell me a little bit about what's happening here.
Yeah, no, I definitely, we are seeing an emergent voice of the Latino community, especially the Mexican community, but we are having a diverse group from Puerto Rican, Dominicans that we have had on Staten Island. But I think we still do have a long way to go. I think Staten Island has few years to go before we actually become a political force to really be calculated in terms of what policy is making. At this moment, I think Port Richmond is obviously one of the most identifiable neighborhoods that you can actually say that's Latino or Mexican. But we are seeing pretty much, I think everyone mentioned that there's definitely that development identity, political force, and Gonzalo, I think, has been done an amazing job really nourishing a lot of young leaders who are here from the Staten Island Dream Coalition, from the Eye Openers, and Kevin's kicking ass here in Wagner, so he's hopefully a political voice and hopefully borough president soon. But we are seeing that we're not there yet, but we are having amazing leaders that we are learning from. Kind of want to emphasize the work that Gonzalo does to nourish young leaders to really participate in the political process, to participate in the issues they care about. So, for example, right now we also have some elected officials who are opposed for the New York State DREAM Act, and supposedly one of them is, partially Latino, Hispanic, but we have a long way to go for us to do so. We're not there yet, but I think that's what we need our community to really come together to really bring forward the stories of our identity.
And so, Irma, if you can comment on the issue of language here and culture, right? Because to go back to culture and how critically important culture is in telling our story as a people, and really where you have a strong cultural foundation as a community, you're going to have strong political power. The two go hand in hand. So, Irma, if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yes, I see it this way. As most of the Mexican families or other Hispanic, I'm talking more about Mexican families because that's what I know best. I can see that they're very isolated. I'm trying to have a cultural event where I can bring them together, give them some voice. And as they can see their traditions and culture and heritage that we're coming from, they feel also more part of the community. That we become stronger as a community, as the Mexican community, but also by having cultural events and traditional and folk arts shown into the larger community gets to know us, gets to know who we are. They can see what we can bring into Staten Island. They can see in a positive way who we are, where we're coming from, and then there is more dialogue and acceptance of from them and from us, from being out there, when we feel proud of where we're coming from. So I think as we become stronger as a community, and the more we know about other communities, we will become a stronger community as a whole. That's how I see it. I see that when I'll give a voice to some of the families that come to the event and make an ofrenda, an altar for their families. First of all, they have to have the courage to come and be open to the whole community to do it, which is difficult. First of all, even if I'm Mexican, not necessarily they think that I'm Mexican. I said, well, if I wasn't Mexican, I wouldn't be speaking English as well as I do. And so there is also this issue of who they think I am. So once they feel more confident about who they are, it will be easier to integrate into the larger community. And with this event, the Day of the Dead celebration, it really gives us this venue for both ways. For the larger community to get to know us, and for the Staten Island community, for the Mexican community to know and find out who they are and be proud of where they're coming from.
Great. Well, thank you, Irma. Anthony, do you want to comment? Because I want to make sure that we have time for Q&A, right? And so we're going to stop the questions here and really take questions from the audience. But Anthony, if you wanted to comment on, as a young person who's lived here, right, or grew up here in Staten Island, your perspective is very different from the rest of us, you know, the rest of the panelists that have come here, right? You know, you're born and raised here. Tell me about, born and raised here, right? See?
Yeah, I was born and raised.
You were born and raised in Staten Island?
Oh, no, not Staten Island. Okay, there you go.
I'm talking about Staten Island. So your experience is really important around, you know, sort of your experience going through school here as a Latino, right? And sort of where you are now. If you could just comment a little bit about that.
Well, I think something that really speaks as to how it's evolving is when I was younger, especially in like grade school and grammar school, that there was no language. There was no emphasis on trying to get the youth to try to understand different cultures. And this was probably 14 years ago, 13 years ago. And I see now, you know, children that are going to grammar school and they're learning all these different languages, and there's this emphasis on getting to know different cultures and diversity and being able to relate with them. It all boils down to that they're not all that different, and that in the long run, it overall benefits themselves as a person. And it just always comes in handy to be able to just connect, and it's great to see that how much it's evolving and how it's becoming an importance in our community.
Great, thank you, Anthony. And so with that, we are going to take Q&A, right? We're going to take some questions from the audience, and so don't be shy. We know Staten Islanders are not shy. So please, any questions that you have for the panelists, speak now, or you know the rest. Yeah. Questions?
Linda.
Yes.
What type of book? What other books besides? What type of books have you written?
Well, I wrote Freestyle, which is a novel that takes place on Staten Island, and it's about two women. It's a fun novel. It's about two women who get tired of being married and doing the housework, and they leave the island to go to the Bronx, and it's sort of they go back in time to find themselves. And then the piece in Staten Island Noir is, like I said, it's about what I saw growing up here, the change in the community. And right now I'm working on a film called Stereotypically Me about a Latina writer. It was inspired by Adaptation, the movie. And it's about a Latina writer who needs to kill her stereotypical muse in order to further her career as a writer, which is not that far from the truth. But I work on plays, I work on short stories and all that. And it's all pretty much the same. It's about identity for me, because I have no idea who I am. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Questions for Caesar. We are doing a lot here at Wagner College to be a more inclusive campus and promote ethnic diversity. What can we do as a campus? And we're already trying to do a lot. What more can we do to help support Dreamers and help support your guys' efforts?
Yeah, I think every time I speak in schools and spaces, that question always comes, right? You know, what to do. But I think really, you know, we have a certain, you know, should I call my senator? Should I fight? You know, should I go meet with this congressman? But I think really we underestimate the power of human connections, which is the storytelling. It's about, you know, you really connecting with the issue, not just on a political level, but also from the perspective of people. And I think what you all are doing, what you and Kevin here, is already significant in itself. I think you are connecting the campus to the stories, to the lives of, I guess, the dreamers, but also you're connecting in a way that people are far beyond than just what a politician may say. So I think it's just continue to tell the stories. Continue to say, I met Caesar, who is ABC, who went to law school, who in college was pretty much, pretty much okay in college, or the experience. So it's about really experiencing, but also sharing the similar experience that we have. So the experience of connecting people is the most thing they can do. So continuing that narrative is as significant as meeting with the President of the United States.
So, where's Christopher?
I just have a question. From the cultural angle, one of the things I kind of worry about is because we talk about all these words, integration, assimilation, and I just think about my ancestors that came to America and really ditched their heritage. I don't know if that's a model I'd like to see again, and I think they would probably agree. I sometimes worry about, with these ideas of political integration, social integration, I understand, but sometimes the political voice gets really loud, and they tend to take over the cultural stuff, and they can be really insensitive. How do we balance that? Does anyone see that type of situation happen where, is anyone having solutions of how we can meet integration with preservation, with the voices of the elders also? I mean, I'd love to hear some stories from the elders too, and have their voice heard. So I'm just curious if anyone has a way to solve my problem.
Anthony?
Yeah, this is on.
Hey.
I think something like that would really rely upon public events such as this Heritage Week. It's all about bringing these people together and making the community realize that there's a greater good out there that you could, or just a different culture overall, whether it's Hispanic or whatever else it could be, that you could just get engaged with it. And like you said, a lot of people who do tend to come here, if they rely on a simulation where they kind of ditch their heritage, you need to rely on these public events to bring people together, to let them realize that there are different cultures out there that they could learn about. And it's all give and take. It really relies on the individuals, and individuals such as yourself who bring these events together to, there could be probably 3 people in here who had no interest in this whatsoever, and after today, maybe they want to look a little bit further into this.
Yeah, I mean, let me just add something to what Anthony said. I think that's a great response from Anthony's part. I think, when we're looking, it's a great question by the Christopher. The Latino sort of experience may be different from other immigrants, right? And I think for a multitude of reasons. One, obviously, there is a continuous flow of Latinos coming into the country, and hopefully that will continue in the future. And so there's a constant sort of reinvigoration of the culture of Latinos because it's very real to us. It's not something that, well, my grandfather spoke Italian and, he's no longer around and, well, we just don't speak Italian anymore. Right? That's not our reality because we are infused, thank goodness, with a great number of immigrants that are still here and more that are coming, hopefully. And so that's very real to us, right? That cultural aspect for us is real. So the Latino experience may be very different, right? Where you're saying that at a social level and at a political level, there can be integration, but culturally, the hope is that the culture stays more vibrant, right? In that way, and more, more real here in the country overall. I mean, look, I think if you think about America, right, and the fact is that, you had, people of Spanish-speaking descent here before you even had a country. And so it has this long trajectory and long history that we hope will be different in that respect. And, but it's to be determined, right? Obviously, we'll see how these things play out. But I think it's a great question, and we will see, I think, is the answer.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
The battle is a constant battle. And I don't think that it ever, we're never gonna, it's not a battle to win, it's a battle on how to deal with it. So you mentioned the political hand over the cultural preservation. For me, it's when I think of political, I think of, look, I'm trying to get into the entertainment industry and I'm trying to create something here. And I feel that there is this group of people that says this is what you are and you're not gonna, your story isn't gonna sell. So I'm dealing with that constantly. And I think that's what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. But I also think, and we've had this conversation when you interviewed me, is that it isn't cut and dry. It isn't, okay, we're going to hang on to being Latino and that's it. It's a very complicated thing. Every 10 years, we're evolving into something else. I am not the same person I was when my grandmother passed away in '95. My grandmother whenever I visited her in Puerto Rico, would make me the food from Puerto Rico. She really, I was very connected to my culture when my grandmother was alive. When my grandmother passed away, slowly but surely, the parents decide they want to retire to Clearwater. I get married to an African American, so I have a biracial child. Things shift. So my sense of being Latina is not the same as it was. My identity is not the same as it was. I also have to take into consideration that my husband is black. So we merge our ideas. For me, it's not about, I don't like being told, well, I don't like being told anything, but I don't like being told, you know, you have to be Latina and this is how you have to be. No, 10 years from now, I'm going to change again. We're all going to change. And we're all going to learn. That's the process. So I think that battle is constant. We're going to go through that in our own lives without the culture issue. It's a battle. Who are we? All of us want to know who we are. Where do we actually come from? It's that question. So for me, it's a bigger thing than just being a cultural, about being Latina. It's a mix of things. It's complicated, but it's beautiful at the same time. Sorry.
Okay. We had
I would like to say something.
Sure, I think we had another question up there.
also works.
Okay. I identify very much with Linda. I'm also married to a Jewish person. And I'm in the same struggle in the sense of teaching my children who they are. So what we're trying to do is to compromise. And we do celebrations about Passover, Hanukkah, but at the same time we celebrate Christmas and we celebrate other Mexican traditions like the Day of the Dead celebration. So when you come with your children you expose them to whatever you think is your cultural or identity. My daughter sometimes she will when she was older, when she was in middle school, I will say to her, "Oh well, Tammy, I don't really know what I want to be when I grow up," and she doesn't see me like that. She sees me as someone very confident that I can do anything and everything, and but when I'm in the United States, when I was in Mexico, I never questioned myself who I was. I was Mexican. When I went to England, I became even more Mexican. Because everybody will point it out to me. I was someone exotic, or I was this, or I was that. And so I became even more aware that I was Mexican. When I came to the United States with those experience, I had some of the experience in England, living in England for 6 years. So when I came here, I thought that I knew more or less where I was going, but obviously New York is a completely different place, and there is more diversity, and so I'm always being very interested in learning about other cultures and other people. So for me, it was great to come here. But when we had to be going back and forth between my Mexican, my kids are not Mexican, are they Jewish? And even my son asked me these kind of questions all the time. So what we can do as parents, what I have been doing, is trying to expose them to some of my heritage, some of the culture. And so if they can see from where I'm coming from, they can take whatever they want. But at the same time, they're growing here in the United States, and they're mixing with everybody else. And they're themselves. I cannot tell them, you have to be like this or you have to be like that. They will take whatever they want. When they were younger, they wouldn't really probably think much about it. But now that my daughter is 24 years old, now she's becoming like more interested in where is she coming from. And so this is a struggle that we have. When I'm doing my artwork, sometimes I want to work more in traditional things, but at the same time, I just want to become a better artist. And it doesn't matter if I'm Mexican or not. I just want to be better at what I do. And that's what it is. So we keep evolving ourselves. Now, the Day of the Dead celebration obviously is celebrated in Mexico in one way. And as much as I want to bring some of those traditions, depends who is here, depends who participates, depends who from the larger community participates, and it will continue evolving. So we will see.
We will see, that's the... Do you want to ask if any of the other artists might want to comment?
Sure,
Would any of the other artists
I would-
want to say a word or two?
Well, I could say that I could say that I share many of your views. The struggle is permanent. It doesn't change. It just grows and it matures, and then you become more comfortable with certain things, and some will never go away because you're always going to be like a mix of something that is not white or black or blue or yellow. It's just a puzzle, which, let's pointing out one of my paintings, it's what we become. We become pieces of what we learn and what we assimilate as an immigrant. There's some things that are great, some we don't take, some we keep from where we're from. Some we just say, hey, this is not for me.
Right.
And I'm just going to run to McDonald's, for example, or, instead of spending hours in the kitchen. But then you want to go and spend those hours making that special thing that's stuck with you, like that dessert that only in your country you can find, So I think a couple of years from now, we're not going to know where we're from. I think that the goal should be that we break the barriers, just evolve as humans, I think. That's my point of view.
Thank you. Do either of the two of you want to
I consider myself New Yorican. I'm first generation Puerto Rican, born here on the mainland. Puerto Ricans are not immigrants, we're migrants because due to politics, I'm not going to go into the whole history, but we're U.S. citizens no matter where we're born. Hasta la luna, we're United States citizens and we're Puerto Rican. The unique thing about being Puerto Rican is that politics plays a huge role in our struggles of identity. Where in other countries, other Latin countries, their status is defined. There's no question what their status is. Puerto Rico has been the longest surviving colony of the Western world. And with that brings not only the issues that we have as far as who we are as individuals and as far as how we relate to our culture, but it makes us more passionate, I believe, on issues of identity and a little bit more sensitive about issues of identity because we're people with no real defined country. So that adds to the Puerto Rican struggle. So issues of identity are always something, at least that I know of in our history and in my personal history, as something that's a very deep, profound, personal struggle. And I think as an artist, there's no way that that can be diminished or not even be recognized. My parents came here to the mainland when they were in their teens, and they met here stateside. And when they came here, as many immigrants do, they wanted to assimilate into American society. So there were like a lot of traditions that were very dear to them, sort of like Dia de los Reyes, which is the big gift-giving holiday in Spanish-speaking countries, not this little elf with the jolly belly and a red nose. That wasn't it. It was the Three Kings. So this was a tradition that my parents, they got to celebrate and appreciate, and they told me stories about this. This was like the Puerto Rican Christmas myth, but we didn't, my brothers, my generation, we didn't get to celebrate this tradition, and we'd hear about it. And as an artist, as I got older and I started researching a lot of the traditions that we have and why we have these traditions and where they come from, and analyzing the politics that I never wanted as an artist to be involved in politics. I thought politics and art have nothing to do with each other, but they do. They do. It's just like having a world without math. The world cannot operate without math. And as much as I hated math in high school, I had to come to the realization that I had to learn math. So it was sort of a thing that had to evolve. And what I've come to do is, with my daughter being born and raised, I wasn't born in Staten Island. I've been in Staten Island for about 25 years. I'm from El Barrio, East Harlem in Manhattan. And I came here when I wanted to start a family because, the grass was greener in Staten Island. So I came here. So when I was raising my daughter, I started realizing, I says, there are these traditions that she doesn't have access to. When I grew up in El Barrio, it was a Spanish, it was a Puerto Rican community. You smelled the food. You heard the music. I lived in the rhythm section. There was no question of what my culture was. When I moved to Staten Island, I moved to Rosebank. It was basically very Italian. I had walked by a guy that had a mom and pop liquor store, and I'd walk by him in the summertime, and he'd say, "Buongiorno, buongiorno," and I'm like, "Oh my God!" Somebody said "Buongiorno" to me. Oh my God, they're speaking to me in Italian. And when my daughter was going to pre-K, she thought she was Italian because there was only 2 kids in her whole pre-K that were Latino. So I said I had to take it upon myself to make sure that she knew what her roots were, that it wasn't something that she could just take for granted. And I became even more and more passionate about all these unique things that happen when you're a first-generation Puerto Rican living in Staten Island. So
there's a few of us.
Yeah, there's a few of us.
Okay. Okay. So we're definitely going to give Jose the last word, but I also know that we need time. We need about 10 minutes for the music demo, so we will wrap up the session.
Yeah, just a quick question. It was in reference to Irma and her traveling to these different countries and how you've been able to go from Mexico and Europe. And I'm kind of remembered also. I was born in Arecibo, Puerto Rico, but I came propeller plane, to the United States in the 50s, early 50s. And I do remember the experience of having to grow in this country, not knowing my identity at all. Public school, junior high school, college. But one thing that really interested me in listening to the panel was the searching for identity. So I searched it through rhythm. I searched it through music. In playing rock and roll, jazz, which is our heritage, the country of the United States. Jazz is the form of music here in the States that belongs to the United States. It's known all over around the world. But in playing all these different styles of music, I had to find my identity, and the way I found it was going to Puerto Rico at a very young age, and my parents took me, and I was taken to a bomba and plena festival.
We'll get to that. Sorry. Do you have a question for her?
Yes, and it was just a reminder that you gave me.
Okay, so I think we're going to ask Jose to say a few concluding reflections and remarks. I hope that you've gotten a glimpse of some Staten Island opinions and definitions.
Well, thank you, Lori. And this has been amazing. I wish we had more time, and we could talk about this for days, right? Obviously, it's such a fascinating topic, and you'll never find the answers, right? They're just like you said, the puzzle, right? There's so many different pieces to this puzzle about who we are, and I think for us, the piece of evolution, which was mentioned several times by the panelists, by some of the people in the audience as well too, is critically important. There are 54 million Latinos in the country today. There are nearly 100,000 Latinos here in Staten Island, according to the last census, and we are evolving as a people. As we become more mainstream American, so does mainstream America become more Latino, right? And that is the reality, right? So obviously the United States is becoming more like us. We're becoming more like, again, the stereotypical what America is, right? Which is another topic of conversation, which is what does that mean? But the reality is that, like language, it's not static, right? Language is constantly evolving, and I think we evolve as human beings, as a people. But it is important, this issue of identity, and this is, I think conversations like this are critically important because we need to have these dialogues. And I remember going through school, and Anthony mentioned this. We didn't have a reference point here. When I got here, it was, never talked about, right? Latinos didn't exist in the history books. Latinos didn't exist in writing. I remember the first time that I read Pablo Neruda, I was in college. It was just like, oh, we have poets, right? And we have great artists, and we have all these other things that were kept from us. And so it's always a constant struggle, but it's part of the whole, right? And I think something that Tony from the foundation mentioned, that we are one people. When disaster hits, we really know that we are one people, and we come together, and that we ultimately have so much in common, right? But it is important for us as a community to know who we are, so that we can be fully integrated into the larger society. So with that, I want to, again, give a big round of applause for our panelists, Linda, Irma, Cesar, and Anthony. They were tremendous. I hope we take the opportunity to engage them after we finish here, and I certainly hope to stay in touch with all of them. So again, and thank all of you for coming today, and thank you, Lori, again.
Okay, so we're going to conclude the formal part with a short presentation reminding us again about the importance of heritage and culture. I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the panelists. You guys were fantastic, and to everyone that came out. Give them a hand. Another hand. Come on. You gotta start putting your hands together. So I'm just going to introduce Jose Ocasio. I'm going to talk to you for a few seconds. Jose is someone I met, I don't know, about 6-8 months ago, and he's very interested in keeping traditional music from Puerto Rico alive, as far as and from other parts of the world. So his journey has been not so much through reading in books or talking. He's, like he said, he's doing it through rhythm. So why don't you just give him something? Go for it.
We're going to play an African
let me this. This is the African thumb piano, which is basically an instrument that was brought from Africa, but it traveled to the Caribbean. And in the Caribbean, it came and they did a takeoff of the African thumb piano to what is called now the marimbula. So the marimbula played in many parts in the Caribbean, which is Haiti, Santo Domingo, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and they took the version of the African thumb piano and made a marimbula, which is played that sounds more like a bass. Rhythm of bomba, which is a very African rhythm coming from Puerto Rico, coming from Africa, but it's a mixture. Like our culture, I always call it the rainbow culture, you know, the colors, because the Puerto Rican varies from black to white, albino, I mean, and black, so black that it looks blue. So the instruments that were brought from Africa, from Spain, the mixture of Spain and the Africans and the Puerto Ricans, and let's not forget the Taino Indian. This is what I call the vegetable instrument, you know, the gore. It's a vegetable. They dry it, and it's called the huilo. Very common and very typical, known in Puerto Rico, which is, I call it the vegetable instrument, because it grows on the tree, they let it dry out, and they cut this. And then in bomba rhythms, you have the bulador. The bulador are barrel drums that were basically rum barrels, or pickle barrels, or rum barrels, that the Africans would play on weekends when they would finish the sugar plantation, working in the sugar plantation systems. And they actually, I'm very proud to say that the Puerto Rican bomba drum was actually made in Puerto Rico. We have congas, which are very known as far as Afro-Cuban congas, but the bomba drum is an original from Puerto Rico. Only because of the barrels that were there, and the Africans were able to lay an animal skin on it and play these rhythms. Now, some of these rhythms here, there are many rhythms in bomba. And the family of bomba is three. It's just very, very basic. It's just one maraca with a lead singer singing. You have what they call the gua, which is not really this instrument. It would be either bamboo, or originally when they were playing the drum, they would lay it down on the floor, and someone on the side would play what they call the gua. The gua sounds like this. So you would have somebody sitting on the side of the drum playing. So that's the family of bomba to actually create the bomba rhythms. So it's just the maraca, the gua, and then the barriles. The barriles would be two 3, there could be 4 or 5 or 7 or 8 drummers playing bomba barrels. They also come in different sizes. So you may have the bulador. This is the bulador. The bulador basically holds the timing. Then you have a requinto, which is the higher, a smaller drum that is a battle dance between the dancer and the drum. Sometimes I can't tell you exactly who is playing against who, because sometimes the drummer can follow the dancer, or sometimes the drummer has follow the dancer, or the dancer's following the drum. So it's like a battle between both. Okay, so I just want to play maybe just one rhythm, because there are quite a few rhythms in bomba that have African names and names also from France, like l'ero, which is a rose. There is a mixture there between the European influence also. We have also the Africans, Quembe, Hollandais, Gracima. So how about play just Quembe? Let me play Quembe. Quembe, Quembe nama, agua Quembe, Quembe nama, Quembe, Quembe nama, Quembe, Quembe nama, Quembe, Quembe nama, agua Quembe, Quembe nama, Quembe, Quembe nama, agua Quembe, Quembe nama, Quembe, Quembe nama, agua Quembe, Quembe nama. Toco, 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 veiga, come coco, toco, 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 veiga, come coco, oh, 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 toco, 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 veiga, come coco, toco, 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 veiga, come coco. That's Quembe. Then you have other rhythms, like in Louisa, that play. Those are just 2 rhythms. But there are many rhythms also. And then again, in bomba, we cannot forget la plena. Because in Puerto Rico, you have bomba and plena. Pero bomba and plena, what's going on is that they are like connected in a way, but 2 different rhythms. These drums are very coast, next to the ocean, very coastal, the ocean. And when you get heading into the mountains and you're going into inland, you have la pleneras, banderas. Which are these right here? It's 3, and you got the requinto. You have the basic, family. So there's a mixture between these 2, even though they're always related together, bomba and plena, but they are really 2 different rhythms. Bomba and plena can be merged together, which has been done, and it sounds very beautiful when you have 3 players playing panderetas, and the requinto who sings, while one guy may hold. You have one drummer that's holding just a basic rhythm. Then you have the other guy who's just holding another pattern. And then you have the requinto, which is the guy who's just like soloing. As that's going on, of course, you can't forget the Taino Indian who's with the wheel. And basically the panderas and the bomba drum were really the daily news. So when they were playing this, from having to work the sugar canes and plantations, they would give them, let's say, the Sunday or the weekend off. they would talk about how they were treated in the sugar canes, or they would talk about, you know, the neighborhood and the community. They would speak about the community through drumming and playing, and this is how they would communicate through music, the sounds of their environment at that time in the community, to share with the community of what was going on through music and drumming and singing. Of course, you have singers, and then the dancing came in. The dancing, as far as the women who were dancing from these rhythms, had a very strong influence also from Spain, because Spain brought the finesse of the dressing, the dress, you know, the manual of their dressing and the way they danced. It was very graceful, you know, not too like really jumping around, but it was very graceful. So it had a very strong influence from Spain, with, you know, so that mixture of all those cultures created bomba and plena, you know, where it exists very strongly in Puerto Rico. But believe me, I grew up in Red Hook, and I did not know anything about my rhythms. But through playing jazz and playing rock and roll, I love the Beatles, but you know, growing up and loving the sounds that I grew up with in this country, I had to definitely find out my identity of Puerto Rico, of where my rhythms are at. You know, like, you know, I'm playing all kinds of sounds, but I'm saying, where are my sounds? So when I finally went to Puerto Rico at a very young age, my parents took me, must have been about maybe 10 or something, and I kind of snuck away one evening, having to hear someone playing the marimbula all night long out this window of my grandfather's house. And I finally went out the next morning and asked the guy who was playing all night long that he needed to build this instrument for me. And he built it for me. But the following night, they were heading out, and I jumped into this car and experienced my first bomba and festival. I went to Luis Aldea. This was the first time. And I, without permission, all my parents just jumped in the car and went with them for about an hour drive in Puerto Rico, a young kid, and I landed in a bomba festival. This was like really visiting Africa. It was a black community, and it was heavy, a lot of bomba drums. So I got in that mix and lost the guys that brought me. So those guys must have been going crazy looking for me, because we lost, you know, we lost Ocasio's son, we can't find her, because I was in the festival, but I was involved in watching all these drummers and stuff. So my first experience in bomba at a young age was actually experience an actual festival in Luis Aldea in Puerto Rico, and that's where my heart really captured a lot of these rhythms. And hopefully what I'm hoping to do very soon also is being able to present a lot of these rhythms and share them in my community where I'm living at now, and going to share some of these rhythms with the community. And I just thank God that Chris has also helped me with the Council on the Arts, Humanity here in Staten Island, to be able to also project myself with some of these rhythms, which I've done already last summer. And hopefully this summer in the parks, we'll be presenting some of these rhythms with dancers and other drummers, and see it in full, you know, like a full sound of, you know, to share here in this community, and kind of bring back people the Latino community to identify to some of these rhythms, because some of these rhythms are not as heard, let alone even trying to get an instrument like this. You can't go to any music store to pick up an instrument like this. But it's just great to be able to share it and hoping to bring it to the community and let people identify themselves to find out, hey, those are rhythms from my island. Thank you.
So we started with Colombian food from Rancanchita Pesa on Forest Avenue in Mariners Harbor. We ended with Puerto Rican traditional music. We heard about growing up Peruvian on Staten Island. We've been enjoying Dominican art in the gallery and on the cover of our booklet. And so I thought I would end with a quote from one of our artists, Homero Herrera, which is really written to talk about the Dominican Republic, but it's about an island, which is us too. An island is limited by its surrounding water, which creates a geographical boundary and can influence the perceptions of its inhabitants with feelings of restriction, isolation, and limitation. And just like the Dominican immigrants who inspire us, who have come to the United States for so long and have transformed their island into something of unlimited possibilities, we know that Staten Island is in the process of being transformed into an island of unlimited possibilities through the work of its different immigrant groups. And so we thank you very much for joining us here tonight, and I hope you will continue to stay, finish the food, speak with the artists. If you haven't seen the exhibit yet, it's right across the way in the library. And please come down, have some more informal conversation. And thank you again for everybody who helped make this event possible.